Hey guys, how's it going? Today we finally wrap up the NES Mega Man games with Mega Man 6. It's been a lot of fun revisiting the entire classic Mega Man series. Mega Man 6 is an interesting beast, with some new ideas not seen previously. You acquire a couple of rush adapter suits, one to help you get through the air, and the other to power through certain blocks or walls. Classic Mega Man has always had different navigational tools at your disposal, since Mega Man 1's Magnet Beam platform gun, Mega Man 2's Item 1, Item 2, and Item 3, and then of course Mega Man 3, 4, and 5 each had Rush Coil, Rush Jet, and Rush Marine. Now we have a new Rush suit that you acquire two forms as you manage to make it through the Robot Masters. You get a jetpack, which is pretty darn cool. You can also stay in that form as long as you want, while your jet boost has limited use at a time and quickly regenerates. The compromise of being able to fly like that is you cannot slide or charge your buster. It often comes down to the situation for which you should be using. The other form you get is a power one, which is pretty cool because a charge shot breaks a wall, and there are a handful of secrets or alternate paths. You've still got your charge shot that started in Mega Man 4, took final shape in Mega Man 5, as well as the slide originating in Mega Man 3. These Robot Master designs, just like in 4 and 5, are all products of fan submission contests. So how does all of this play out? What will it take to reach the new foe, Mr. X, and Dr. Wily this time? Let's take a look at this NES series capping 94 release, with our trusty charge shot and slide abilities, along with our new rush adapters to find out. I'm Jeff, and this is Marmax Gaming. The plot in a Mega Man game isn't usually something to be taken too seriously, and sometimes it feels like they tried unnecessarily, albeit not very hard, to make things sound different when they're ultimately the same. For example, in Mega Man 4 and 5, we had some pseudo bad guy before it ended up being our classic nemesis Dr. Wily all along, and here we've got Mr. X that I'm sure could never possibly turn out the same way. Small detail to point out, can't help but notice that they went through the trouble of having Mega Man's eyes move around for your stage selection in previous games, but apparently here they're like, whatever, who cares about that? It is important to mention, and I was surprised to read that apparently Capcom wasn't going to bother publishing Mega Man 6 in North America, but it was actually Nintendo of America responsible for that effort. So really, I guess we should be just thankful that this game made it over to us at all. It's always important to take a look at the Robot Masters and compare it to what we've seen come before it. I noticed that half of the cast represents elements, while the other four are more like warrior concepts, taking it back to elemental basics with Blizzard Man, Windman, Flame Man, and Plant Man. Then we've got Tomahawk Man, Yamato Man, Nightman, and Centaur Man. The mugshots look cool, the stage select theme sounds pretty great. The first Robot Master I ended up getting through was what looks like the evolved form of Airman into Windman. They throw a bunch of numbers and stats out there that seem pretty cool, but honestly, it didn't seem to mean anything as I played through the game. Kind of interesting to see how they didn't use the common American spelling for defense as well. Windman's fortress takes place up in the clouds, as you may have guessed, between its panda bear enemies that take multiple shots and others that require more accuracy, along with a nice use of the wind theme concept. It's a nicely paced and structured stage with plenty of enemies, platforming, and an excellent soundtrack. It sounds so nice, it kind of makes you wish that your buster charging wasn't nearly as loud, and you may sometimes end up avoiding using it just to get a nice listen. Things can often get pretty critical with the Mega Man series going on as long as it has, yet it's always super important to praise and appreciate its seemingly basic qualities that were absolutely lost on way too many NES games. The control feels as immediate, tight, and responsive as possible. Charging and sliding are great mechanics that help keep your hands busy. The graphics are bright, distinct, and clean. No blurry or puddles of messy pixels anywhere. It's very easy to tell what everything is, plus its backgrounds often have some decent depth or detail as well, when they're not just a sheet of black. There's a great flow to the level that has you progressing to the right, climbing up, and falling down, with intermittent rooms that make you think a bit more about what you're about to do along the way. Getting to Windman, we can see that Mega Man 6 added a bit more dramatic effect to their boss's entry. Windman has a handful of things he can do. You may get pulled in toward him, so you need to use the slide to get away. He also has a very quick approaching attack that you need to react quickly to as well, in order to not get landed on. The third thing he does is shoot out a couple of propellers, or gyros if you will. If you're ready to react, they're not too hard to jump over. After getting caught by surprise in the first fight, it wasn't very difficult to finish him off on the second try. Your weapon acquiring screen is pretty badass with some nice sprites and music. Kind of surprising to see that an air attack sticks to the ground like Windstorm does, but on to take on our second level. Let's give a Tomahawk Slam to Tomahawk Man. We've got a Wild West theme going on, which is a pretty funny tieback to American history between cowboys and Indians. Look at how they even gave these robots a cute little hat. Whoever built these things at least had a sense of humor. Part of the level reminds me of Guts Man or Stone Man. Before too long, we get to see the desert sunset rippling from the heat waves in the background, which is a cool touch. These skull enemies can be a little annoying, but when in doubt, it always works to run away. We have some tank-like enemies where there's usually at least one of them per level, not too bad to slide by and pump with bullets. A couple mini-bosses, if you could even call them that, are shooting down these big containers of Met enemies, which isn't too bad with a decent mash. Like with lots of Mega Man and classic games, I've said it before and I'll say it again, a strong offense is often the best defense, and usually the best way to get through many of the challenges ahead of us. Checkpoints are a big deal with Mega Man. Nobody likes getting game overs and sent back super far. The levels do have solid length to them, being at least 3 minutes or so of pushing forward at a decent pace. A consistent checkpoint throughout the series is reaching the gates right before the Robot Master. Being careful with your jumps, especially around spikes, and mindful of your health will save quite a bit of time as you make it through the game. Tomahawk Man can be a bit challenging. He has a couple projectiles that come out pretty quickly, giving you a hard time. Fortunately for us, Robot Masters aren't usually dealing insane amounts of damage like they used to. Something new that a handful of these Robot Masters do that caught me by surprise are the way they bounce right off of walls when jumping your direction. He doesn't ever run at you, but can do little hops. He likes to throw an axe or sling a few tomahawk feathers that spread further apart as they cross the screen. The same type of jump should have you avoiding both of those throws. It's just a matter of being careful with your jumps and not forgetting to use your charge shot. Let's go and take on the medieval warrior type and say goodnight to Nightman. Nightman has a really cool themed level with a cross of castle architecture with the metallic future look that we're used to seeing in the series. Even the instant kill spikes look more medieval and castle-like than usual. Sometimes it just works better to take the hit and move on with certain situations. There are some deadly areas, but they're not very long or difficult. Some enemies can be more annoying than others, obviously, and the ones who temporarily shield from your shots are up there. It's just a matter of timing, but they can be placed in some precarious spots that may lend their hand in a fall off of platforms to your doom. You do have to give Mega Man 6 credit for having some pretty consistent variety with their different backgrounds. It's not done to the same degree, but it reminds me of what we saw with Super Castlevania 4. Kinda crazy to remember that this game came out a couple years after that. A pretty cool area that I'm glad they included were these bouncy walls, which doesn't necessarily go along with the theme, but it is fun. The most surprising thing of all is Nightman himself. He looks like such a badass, and I honestly love his design. Seems like we'd be in for a tough fight. You'd never guess that Nightman is the slowest and easiest Robot Master yet. The only thing he has on you is his mace weapon that could surprise you at first, plus his shield that blocks shots. But when you realize to jump away from his attack, and he's such a floaty jumper, I'd have a hard time saying anybody is easier than this guy. A top contender for easiest Robot Masters in this series, easily bottom 5 in difficulty. You jump away from the mace, get in your shots as it retracts, also try to time it as he's floating through the air to hit underneath his shield. This was my first time facing off against Nightman, waltzed in here without full health, not knowing his pattern, and it didn't even take a second try. That's just how simple it is to put Nightman down. The weapon you acquire is actually pretty strong and useful. I end up using it a little bit later on. As we make our way to our 4th Robot Master, we're almost halfway. After seeing how easy that was, you could say we're feeling a bit calm and relaxed. Let's continue the groovy mood with Plant Man. The beginning of the stage will probably make you think of Woodman's level immediately, except this time we climb up instead of going down. Plant Man is another solid soundtrack, accompanied with a couple new mini-bosses. Some springs through grassy patches, and these little mechanical hoppers too. Have to be extra careful of those watery bottomless pits. They have some extended sections of this, and it's totally understandable to fall victim at least a couple times to its tricky hazards. Finally getting to Plant Man. We mentioned Woodman earlier, and Plant Man actually gets a shield just like this. Instead of leaves, this time it's petals. After maybe getting hit a few times, you'll recognize that this is a really simple and short pattern. The shield gets pulled up, Plant Man either jumps toward or away from you, releasing the shield your way, and that's when you hopefully have a charge shot ready. As long as you avoid being landed on, can jump over the petal shield, and return fire, that's how simple this fight really is. As we clear stages, you can see there are some symbols there, and basically the little happy Mega Man face means that you have everything you're supposed to get. There are also the 4 letters for Beat, the little bird that we've seen previously, but we'll find out if it's necessary to get him at all. We've waited a long time to see a new frosty foe in the series, starting back in Mega Man 1 with Iceman. Now it's time to move on to the bigger, but certainly not better, Blizzard Man. You could imagine that a name like that comes with some slippery floors, which we get to deal with throughout, but one new platforming object we see are these timers that start after you land or touch the platforms. It's at this point when I noticed I could now use the jet upgrade, and the freedom it immediately grants you is awesome. It's super cool that it doesn't wear off, just has temporary jet use, but it's not frustratingly tiny or anything like that. Just have to keep in mind that not being able to charge or slide is going to make things a lot tougher for you in several areas. Things actually get pretty creative here, with the top of a submarine bobbing up and down, and spikes above to look out for, along with some more cool little uses of those self-destructing platforms we saw earlier. That's how the stage ends too, before we finally reach Blizzard Man. He's one of the more distinct and sillier looking Robot Masters, I think we could agree on that, just looking like a fat snowball with a set of skis and poles, plus his mittens and a cute little hat. Blizzard Man's actually another fight that only took a single death to figure out. He can roll up and bounce off the wall, which I have to point out immediately reminded me of the Ninja Gaiden damage sound. When he rolls up and goes into the wall, you just jump over and move away. Then the snowflakes are pretty simple if you give yourself just a bit of room to move over and jump. Once you realize that those are really his only 2 attacks, he's also a contender for the top 5 easiest Robot Masters in the whole series. The Blizzard attack weapon looks like it has some pretty cool and helpful range too. As we've been selecting Robot Masters, you probably noticed some funny details on these stat screens, like with Yamato Man. The impregnable fortress? I wouldn't say so, because only 5 minutes later I came away with his weapon. He has one of the more popular themes in the game and has some great sound to it. I ended up using the jet adapter to get through a lot of the stage. Unfortunately, still don't have the power adapter, so I keep missing secrets and forks in the road with every one of these blocks we pass. If it's necessary to go back for power-ups, we would definitely figure that out by later. Speaking of forks in the road, we use the jet for the ladder up here. The jet really does make your life a lot easier if there's not a low or spike ceiling. Getting to Yamato Man. I didn't have much health to figure him out on the first life. The second attempt was going better, although I was still losing to his quick projectile that zips out and sticks to the ground. Then he runs over to pick it up again. He also jumps up and shoots a handful downward, and the gap there is pretty big, so it's not too bad to avoid. When you're at 0 lives, you kinda figure it's best to finish this guy off with an E-tank and take him down later for real, without one during the boss rush. Don't want to waste the time getting sent back and squandering the opportunity once we're already here. After taking a short break, we get to use our password to continue progress. Nice little tune, and Mega Man's password features have always been a lot better than the super long or annoying ones out there. You could say at this point I'm feeling fired up to finish the Robot Masters. Let's get personal and start a flame war in the comments with Flame Man. It's a pretty interesting theme out here in the oil field. It's kind of funny to see the sand and notice the background shapes of palaces. Plus, with unique sounding instruments, it gives you some serious Middle Eastern vibes. I mean, Flame Man is even wearing a turban himself. The oil field has a unique and deadly hazard with instant kill fire pits. You sometimes have to move across patches of oil, and if you land in it once an enemy ignites it, that's all she wrote for Mega Man. There are also some enemies that can only be knocked over with a charge shot and inflate in order to cross gaps, which is really cool and something we haven't really seen yet. The jet adapter, you could imagine, is going to be the safest way to navigate these types of challenges, easily crossing over the deadly fire. Getting the Flame Man. He can jump around bouncing off walls, stop to shoot flame rounds, but his most annoying thing to avoid is when his special flame blast erupts from the ground. It comes up quickly, it can easily catch you standing in the wrong spot. Managing to not get hit by that is tricky, and you need to get a real feel for the spacing. Plus the fire blocks your shots too, making it harder to trade damage if you do get hit. On the second attempt, just had to focus on timing with the charge shots, jumping over his flames, and doing the best I could to land between those flame blasts when they shoot up. With only one Robot Master left, we get the Flame Blast and Rush Power Adapter, which we will use a couple different times. Have to point out that the Power Adapter has a pretty goofy run cycle for whatever reason. We have been passing some forks in the road, but as I've said, the way I see it, we will only go back for any of these 1-up or E-tank rewards if we actually have a hard time trying to finish this game. Moving onward to the fight of the century with Centaur Man. This is when we get the token water level experience of the game. We have a taste of ancient Greek mythology with this one. If you don't know, centaurs go back to Greek mythology, and apparently the god of water, Poseidon, was also the god of horses. So as far as level themes go, that's pretty different. Plenty of things falling from above on top of you, like pelicans dropping fish, or little alien looking mechs. We make our way underwater with some familiar challenges of tight jumps with spikes lining the walls and ceiling. Where things get totally unique though are when you're underneath the water somehow. It flows up and down, which you need to time in order to get over the spikes, and that's pretty neat. Even enemies are affected by the water, and I think they could have played this out even longer. It's a pretty short section. Some of the more dangerous and tough to take out enemies I've encountered are these submarines that drop from the clouds, so they're kind of just worth running past. It's worth noting and pointing out just how much smoother and better the waterfall animation and graphics have come since the somewhat harsh flickering of Bubble Man in Mega Man 2. Shortly after, we see a moment to use Rush Jet, even though the second entrance to the boss is at the bottom of the ladder anyway. It's kind of weird that taking alternate paths like this reward you with the beat parts, even though they never show it to you or have you physically walking into one of his parts, so I find that really strange, and different than anything we've seen before. Getting to Centaur Man himself. Luckily his shots don't do much damage at all because he can stop time and then you're at the mercy of his bouncing spread shot. Centaur Man doesn't jump at all, but he does run and teleports quite often. Usually if you're moving around, it's not too hard to avoid hitting him, but you can always get unlucky. His spread shot is pretty simple to get underneath as long as you're not frozen. Getting some space from the wall is the best way to avoid getting hit by those spread shots. It's easy to get caught for damage, so main thing is making sure you're inflicting as much damage as you can so you can finish him off before he finishes you. Just like that, we're already through all 8 Robot Masters from Mega Man 6, and overall, there were some great soundtracks, cool level design, and while not super challenging, some pretty fun fights too. Now it's time to see what's going on with Mr. X. As always, the final stretch of levels has tougher moments than what we've seen before, plus a solid handful of big boss fights. And with how mild a lot of the Robot Master fights were, I can tell you that I was honestly quite shocked with the jump up in speed and challenge with a couple of these fights we have left. It would definitely take a little while and perhaps get a bit redundant to talk about another 8 levels, so how about we just jam out while I show them to you. Getting to Mr. X, with how large his giant wrecking ball is, it seems dangerous at first, but it's actually really simple once you have the timing and spacing, since there's not that much that can happen here. As the fight ends, he says his plan of world domination has failed, just like their spell checker. And I'd like to say that this silly plot of Mr. X has also failed because, what do you know, without explanation, a mask comes off and it's Dr. Wily. Gee, there's simply no way we could have seen that coming. Some may ask, why even bother? Just give us Dr. Wily and his 2 final fortresses, or an extended one as we go. Only one more stretch in the game, some big bosses and deadly moments out there that call on us to use our best skill in new adapters. Dr. Wily, for the 6th time, you are going down. Here we are, finally getting to the forms of the final boss. The first form ends up being quite straightforward. Dodge the big projectiles and slide underneath. The the second form is just a bit different, but punishing and different enough to mess up the pattern you just learned. You won't always be able to go underneath this one, which can be tricky with how it alternates what direction you are moving next to such a big sprite. Same idea, avoid being hit by a projectile, and then Dr. Wily in his giant hopping machine before we finally get into the third and final phase of the fight. You could imagine that there's probably an easy way through the fight with another weapon or beat, like always, but just in honor of Mega Man 6 and its distinguished cover art, figure there's not a more right way to finish this off than with the jet adapter. With Dr. Wily disappearing and reappearing at any height or spot on screen before unleashing 4 quick winding orbs, definitely have to look out, and you may realize that this is the best point to use those E-tanks if you didn't need them before. Mega Man 6, it has great graphics, some pretty excellent and easy to listen to music, the control is tight, we saw some cool new ideas come through in the stage design and your jet suit adapter. It's a very good NES game. It's definitely not as challenging or iconic as the original trilogy, but if you have enjoyed Mega Man, or even if you haven't played the series yet, it's still quite a bit of fun and worth playing through. I'm really not sure why they needed to end with the worst text tones in history. It's like nails on a chalkboard, it's terrible. But nice to finally see Dr. Wily back behind bars where he belongs. Well, with all 6 classic Mega Man games taken down, I suppose it only makes sense that the next thing to do is finally get to work on the easiest to hardest Buster-only Robot Master videos. I appreciate you so much for tuning in and help this channel grow. I look forward to seeing you next time. Time to take these games with me and get to work. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.